Imagine finding out that everything your husband told you, his past, his family, even his health, was a complete lie. The wife just uncovered the shocking truth about her husband's fabricated life, and now she's wondering, how can she get him out of her life safely? I met my husband 4 years ago, just before moving from PA to GA. Shortly after my move he followed me, and we fell in love. We lived together from 2015 onward, and in mid-November 2018 we married. Today I discovered that virtually everything he has ever told me or demonstrated about his life was a complete fabrication. From specific medical issues to jobs, past and present, to education to family relationships, to the claim that his first language was not English, to phone conversations that never happened to people he knows to. If you can think it, he has lied about it. We live together, but my name is on the lease and I hold the title on both of our cars. He has some belongings in our home, but most of it has been purchased with money that I have earned over our 4 years together, plus money from my personal savings account. I am totally open to letting him walk with all of his stuff, and even signing the older car to him. After a quick internet search, it looks like I might have grounds for annulment of my marriage, on the basis of being seriously misled. Do I? What will I need to be able to prove in order to make it work? And is there anything else I need to keep in mind to aim for an annulment instead of a divorce? He is mentally ill, though quite differently than I was led to believe, and receives SSDI each month, but that is nowhere near enough for him to live on. What is the legal way to get him out of my house and life with minimal risk, damage, and cost to me? Also, do I look for a divorce lawyer in this situation? Sorry if that's a dumb question. Also, how does custody of pets work? We have 2 kittens we got in July, and I can't imagine separating them. I also can't imagine him being able to take care of them once we're separated, but I don't know if that matters. Additional information. I've had a bunch of questions about what, specifically, the man in question lied about. Here's a partial list. 1. That he went to school in Britain, met his ex-wife there, and lived there for about 20 years before returning to the US. 2. That he went to the bank and tried to close out our joint account but couldn't do it because he wasn't an authorized signer on the account. 3. Full list of emergency medical information, including doctors' names and phone numbers, and list of medications he wasn't. 1. For that his grown kid stole about $2,000 from him and kicked him out of his own house. 5. That he'd managed to scrape together enough money to buy a house, but then his property tax increased and he ended up losing the house in a totally unfair turn of events. Turns out he'd so egregiously messed up his family's finances that his ex-wife ended up losing the home she grew up in. 6. That his father had abused him horribly as a kid, and that his mom had stood by and let it happen. 7. That his aunt and uncle were the only relatives who'd really cared for him, and his uncle had died suddenly of a heart attack right before we really got serious. Uncle is still alive and well, BTW. 8. That he'd been in Berlin when the wall came down. 9. That he was harassed at the grocery store by some random lady that didn't like the way he looked. 10. That he grew up speaking Polish as a first language. 11. That he walked and talked in his sleep in his first language Polish, as a side effect of the medication he wasn't on. 12. That his dad was a woodworker and was making furniture for us. 13. That his brother worked for DARPA. 14. That his aunt was a nun. 15. That a nurse at the hospital had told him some things about my dad's case that we needed to attend to. 16. That he had a specific job with a host of people he worked with on a regular basis, and all the stories he told me on a nearly daily basis about those people. 17. That his boss had bought him the fancy new watch he had on his wrist. 18. That Mr. Park, the camera repair guy, did work on his cameras for free or at a discount. 19. Countless lies about money spent or refunds unavailable for all kinds of reasons. 20. That his counselor had actually said exactly what I just said when they talked about it too. This happened over and over again. 21. That he was bipolar and borderline schizophrenic, but well controlled and committed to taking his meds. 22. That he was feeling down at a given time. 23. That he'd posted a sign at work to collect donations for a cause I cared about, and now the only problem was finding a truck big enough to transport it all. This was the lie that led to the end. 24. That he'd met the Queen. 25. That he'd been commissioned to make artwork for Harry and Meghan, and a special concierge for the Queen had come for tea to pick it up. 26. That he got shot at in this bad neighborhood this one time. 27. That a candidate in a local election campaign had some specific and objectionable position. 28. That he'd talked to so-and-so and such had happened, and isn't that awesome / awful / stupid / tremendous. 29. That some awful person had hit the front of our car in the parking lot and never left a note, but it's okay because he filed a report with the cops, who won't be able to do anything anyway. 30. That gallery some name had bought his artwork, but also the payment got screwed up. 31. That his ex-wife had cheated on him continually. 32. That he'd done some activity on any random day. 33. That he'd been asked to interview for a job at 34 that he'd messed up his knee and went to get it fixed, but his insurance didn't cover it so he had to pull money out to pay for it. 35 that he had medical insurance. 36 that he'd been on the highway in Britain and his motorcycle broke down. On his way to get help he was hit by a car, and that's how his leg got messed up. 37 that he'd looked for places to live after I was moving out, but he couldn't find anything and so he needed to stay with me to avoid homelessness. 38 that he needed our cats to keep him in a good mental space. See above mental illness lies. 39 that he'd actually broken a rib in that car accident we just had, but don't worry, he'd be okay. 40 that some FBI agents had interviewed him because Trump. 41 that he had dollar pending with some lawsuits in PA, but also who knows if, when that will appear, because wouldn't you know it, but the entire law firm had been busted for I forget what. 42 that he'd divorced his wife many years before he met me. 43 that he loved me. Update 1 year later. The best advice I can give for those stuck in an abusive or otherwise horrible relationship is this. 1. No matter what you think now, it will be better if you get out. 2. Find people who will give you the kind of advice you'd give someone if roles were reversed, then do what they tell you that you should do. 3. When you're ready to process everything, find a therapist to help you through it, and for as well as you can, act in ways that will allow you to look yourself in the eye when it's over, because that will matter and also it will help you in the long run. There's a disturbing number of people out there who have lived through things like this and much worse. Please be kind to one another, support those who need it, and refuse to tolerate poor treatment of others. It's been a little bit over a year since I turned to this community as my life fell rather dramatically to pieces around me. My original post didn't get a ton of attention, but the replies I received helped me tremendously, and seeing where I am a year later may also provide some hope for those going through their own crisis. In particular, you helped me construct my initial list of immediate to-do items, and put me on the right track to figure out how to extricate myself from the relationship. The day I first posted here was the day I found out that my then-husband had lied and fabricated most of what I knew about him. Other things I did that day included teaching a class to 200 undergrads about 15 minutes after I found out for sure, and kicking off a day-and-a-half-long job interview for the next stage in my career, a job which I somehow landed. What unfolded over the following 3 months can really only be described as living my way through my own version of a Lifetime movie. At some point I moved into an extended stay hotel, and as time passed I learned about the depths and breadths of the lies and deceit he'd used to both control me and get what he wanted, and the lengths he'd go to try and get his grip back on what he'd successfully manipulated his way through for about 4 years. What I know now, and what I'm kind of glad I didn't really know then, was that I wasn't actually as safe with him as I thought I was. So I'm thankful I managed to get out with only psychological/emotional/financial burden, and no physical trauma. About 2.5 months later, I successfully had my marriage annulled on the basis of fraudulent coercion to marry. I ended up doing the necessary research and filing the paperwork myself, which was not an easy task, but was both cheaper and faster than it was going to be if I hired a lawyer. A few weeks after the annulment, I moved my belongings out of our apartment and moved to a new city and my new job. Without him, but with the kittens. As of late June, I finally had him convinced that contacting me was pointless because he wasn't getting me back, and so I've been largely free to recover from the trauma and crisis mode I lived in for about 3 months. One of the things I've learned from all of this is how incredibly difficult it is to get out of a relationship in a situation like this. Besides the obvious difficulty of navigating the legal system, and the cost associated with it, there's the cognitive dissonance of constantly trying to remember to relate to that other person in light of the new information you found out about them. It really and truly took every life skill and tremendous support of my family and friends network to get out in more or less one piece. And even still, the road to recovery and a return to thriving is a long one. So, thanks to those who helped me back on that terrible day in January 2019. And if you know someone who is going through something like this, please offer whatever you can in support, because they definitely need it. Relevant comments. OP on how all the lies unraveled. OP. His lies and fabrication started before we met, and were on a rather large scale. Ultimately things fell apart because he made too many promises he couldn't keep. I had questions in the past but had managed to move past them. This time it was just too much and I asked him for evidence. I felt absolutely terrible, but I wanted a picture of something just to allay my fears. He provided the picture, but there was a small element that didn't quite fit. Again, feeling like a terrible person, I did a reverse image search and discovered it wasn't his picture. This led to more lies, as he quickly fabricated new layers to make the things I'd found out more palatable. But he took a route that meant there were questions about what was true and what he'd imagined. That led to me pulling at some threads in an attempt to help him put some pieces together. I know, right? In the process, I reached out to some people who were supposedly part of his life, and everything began to tumble in on itself. After a few days I had a more complete story and that was it. Except, It took quite a while to consistently remember that he was not the person I thought he was. All told, I think it took about 6 months to totally come to terms with it. And even now there are occasional moments where I have to explicitly remind myself that he's not actually person A, but is actually Sir Turdface the undesirable.